The Falcons landed their big fish and safety Jessie Bates on a very active day of day one of the NFL's legal tampering period. We're breaking it all down with the Athletics' Josh Kendall today on Locked On Falcons.
You are Locked On Falcons, your daily Atlanta Falcons podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
So, guys, you know me. I'm Aaron Freeman, a.k.a. Sirius Black, a.k.a. Mr. Drew, and of course, the most humble host that has ever existed in the galaxy here of this illustrious Locked On Falcons podcast, your daily Atlanta Falcons podcast, part of Locked On Sports Atlanta, your team every day. And we thank you guys for making Locked On Falcons, Locked On Jessie Bates, your first listen. Free and available, of course, Monday through Friday on a variety of podcast platforms, including on YouTube. Make sure you subscribe to Locked On Falcons channel on YouTube, and you will get the video version of the podcast the night before the audio drops. And check us out on your Roku and Amazon Fire TV by downloading the Locked On Sports Atlanta app on Roku and Amazon Fire TV. So, guys, we did it. We did whatever it takes.
This is the fight of our lives. And we're going to win. Whatever it takes.
So if you're new here checking out Locked On Falcons for the first time, welcome. But this was the signature move that we have been hoping for weeks, signing Jessie Bates. And funnily enough, it happened 15 minutes after I wrapped recording with Josh Kendall of The Athletic, who we'll have on later in the episode to talk about the other moves. So when Josh and I were talking, we didn't know about the Jessie Bates stuff. It happened 15 minutes, and it's funny because last year when I had Josh, and I kind of explain it later in the episode when we intro Josh, but I had Josh on like the Tuesday, like 45 minutes before the Deshaun Watson news broke for the Falcons, and Josh was on the podcast saying, oh, the Falcons are probably going to be pretty quiet this offseason because they don't have any money. And then 45 minutes later, that episode has never seen the light of day. And so I joked with Josh, like, I'm having you on just in case something pops off. And so 15 minutes, breaking news, Jessie Bates signs with the Atlanta Falcons for a 4-year, $64 million deal. If you're curious on why we love this, he's a ball hawking center fielding safety. That was something that the Falcons sorely lacked last year. Jalen Hawkins did his best in that role. I would not call what Richie Grant did when he played single high safety last year his best, but the Falcons played a lot of cover 3 last year. And if that continues under new defensive coordinator Ryan Nielsen, they're going to need a guy that can play that single high safety, and Jessie Bates is absolutely one of the best center fielders in the NFL. And if the Falcons dial back their cover 3 and Nielsen installs a defensive scheme very similar to the one run under Dennis Allen in New Orleans the last several years, which was a lot more split safety looks, a lot of too high, a lot of quarters. In fact, a higher degree of those coverages than necessarily cover 3. Then, Bates fits that scheme perfectly as well, because the Bengals over the last couple of years have run a lot of sort of too high shells. And we had talked about in the past how Marcus Williams, now with the Baltimore Ravens, the former Saints safety, was kind of the linchpin, the key ingredient to make that sort of defense and their coverages work. Williams was capable, one of the top center fielders in the league, able to handle some of the deep stuff that allowed the other safety, Von Bell, earlier in Williams's career, and then Malcolm Jenkins the last couple of years, to be a lot more aggressive and play underneath, which is something that is a strength to those players. And that's going to be a similar situation that we're expecting from Richie Grant, a similar player that seems to play better the closer he is to the line of scrimmage, being that aggressive playmaker. So we're hoping that Jessie Bates is able to unlock the full potential of Richie Grant and also unlock the full potential of the cornerbacks. The same thing with Williams, being able to cover that deep stuff. The Saints corners could be a lot more aggressive, a lot more physical at the line of scrimmage, because they knew they had that high level safety help over the top. That's music to the ears of a very grabby corner like Marshawn Lattimore. And that is something that the Falcons can now do with AJ Terrell and whoever else lines up across from him, whether that's Casey Hayward or somebody else this offseason. So Jessie Bates is basically, in a nutshell, a guy that's going to make plays, and he's going to help make everybody else in the secondary better around him. And with improved coverage, that means improved ability to get home and sack the quarterback, which is something that we're hoping that the Falcons will do a lot better job of now that they brought in David Onyemata. More on that move with Josh Kendall a little bit later. But to sort of finish off Jessie Bates, high character guy, leader, is going to reunite with Steve Jackson, who's the Falcons, I think, new defensive backs coach, who coached defensive backs, I think mostly corners in Cincinnati back in like 2020. So this sort of wraps up a great first day of free agency, and you love to see this. I was optimistic that we would see the Falcons be proactive on day one of this tampering period. Probably, at least based off my memory, I'd have to really go back and look. Probably the most active we've seen them in, a tampering period, let alone just day one of the 2-day tampering period before we get to Wednesday, when all these moves should become official and hopefully will become official. There'll be nothing sadder than having to come on this podcast to tell you guys that Jessie Bates or David Onyemata decided that, you know what, I don't actually want to go to Atlanta, but hopefully we will not have to deal with that. So yeah, man, great day one of this thing for the Falcons this offseason. They did whatever it takes to get Jessie Bates. So we'll see what other moves they continue to make. But as we continue today's episode here with Josh Kendall of The Athletic, we'll break down the other moves that they made, bringing in Jonnu Smith, David Onyemata, extending Chris Lindstrom, Keith Smith, Bradley Pinion. So a lot of moves to get into, and we'll get into all of that as we continue today's Locked On Falcons. But first, guys, I want to tell you that it is beyond the midway point of the NBA season, and it is the perfect time to download FanDuel, which is America's #1 sports book. And if you're new to FanDuel, don't worry about it, because you have a no sweat first bet up to $1,000. That means if your first bet doesn't win, you will get bonus bets back up to $1,000. Just download the FanDuel app, and whether you want to bet on the NBA, the XFL, the NFL draft, you got baseball coming up, it is the perfect time to check out FanDuel, whether you want to bet money lines, point spreads, parlays, all that and more. So don't miss your chance to get your no sweat first bet up to $1,000 in bonus bets when you go to FanDuel.com/lockedon. That's FanDuel.com/lockedon to learn more. Make every moment more with FanDuel, an official sports betting partner of the NBA. All right, everyone, welcome back to another illustrious edition of the Locked On Falcons podcast with an illustrious guest, none other than Josh Kendall of The Athletic, who covers the Atlanta Falcons. And Josh, we had you on this time around last year, and it was all quiet on the Western Front, as they say, just topical stuff with the Oscars and whatnot. But, shortly after we had a chat last year, the news that the Falcons were interested in Deshaun Watson broke. So I feel reasonably confident, since the Falcons got a bunch of stuff done early in the day on Monday to kick off the legal tampering period, that we won't have to scrap this episode like we had to do last year's episode. But for those of you that haven't heard the news, the Falcons made several moves early on Monday, and we'll see if they make moves later on Monday that I'll have to break in and edit this episode later on. But
you're just trying to conjure up Atlanta Falcons are again interested in Lamar Jackson headline, aren't you? This is why you brought me on, just to see if you can recreate that type of.
Pretty much.
I get it. That's fine. That makes sense.
Look, I'm here for the content. So everyone, if you didn't know, the Falcons signed or agreed to terms, that we should stress, since it's tampering and nothing's official. They agreed to terms with ex-Saints defensive tackle David Onyemata. They traded a 7th-round pick to the New England Patriots for tight end Jonnu Smith. They made Chris Lindstrom the highest paid guard in the NFL with a 5-year contract extension worth $105 million. They re-signed Keith Smith and punter Bradley Pinion. I guess, Josh, we'll start. Where do you want to start talking about these moves today, and which of these moves is the most notable in your eyes?
Well, for me, the most notable is on its own is David Onyemata, but I do think, I don't know if it's significant as much as it is funny to me that, they come out charging out of the gates with defensive tackle, offensive guard, a fullback, a tight end. I mean, this is a very Arthur Smith day. I mean, you get the impression that he would love to win the NFC South with like Desmond Ridder and a bunch of 5th-round picks, and his highest paid dudes are guards and tight end. I mean, it's got a very Arthur Smith flavor. But the one signing that stands out is Onyemata. We've all seen they've admitted they need defensive line help. They need pass rush help. And every time you mentioned pass rush help to Arthur Smith in the last 6 months, he immediately says that can be a defensive tackle too. You get a defensive tackle, it helps all those other guys. So I'm not at all surprised to see them start with defensive tackle. I still think there's an edge rusher in their future. I still think there's somebody in the secondary in their future. I think you agree with both of those things. But this was a nice, get some momentum, dip your toe in the water, get started. Onyemata, I think, clearly comes into. I mean, this is a guy who, if he signs some places, you'd think, is he going to be a rotational guy? Is he going to be their third tackle? I mean, he comes in here. He's clearly a starter. That's got to be appealing to him. Taquan Graham comes back healthy. You've at least got a serviceable rotation in the middle of the defensive line if you stopped there. And I'm not sure they will, even at defensive tackle, but we'll see.
Yeah, that was going to be my next question. Is this the first of multiple ex-Saints that we might see added to the defense? And do you think this is the biggest addition that they'll be making to the pass rush? If we're fast forwarding to 3 months from now and we look back at this offseason, is David Onyemata the sort of signature addition to this Falcons pass rush, you think?
If it is, then I think you'll be sketching that right below the Lamar Jackson line on the tombstone for this regime. I mean, so no, it just can't be. It's a good start. He's a good player. It's a, it doesn't have to be a high profile signing to be a good signing, but they can't stop here. Marcus Davenport's a guy I know you've mentioned as a possible good fit. He checks a lot of the boxes. Arthur Smith has familiarity with him because of Ryan Nielsen. They could get him on sort of a light a fire under his butt deal because he's coming off of a half-sack season. He's kind of got something to prove, so you might be able to get him without having to commit a ton of money. Leonard Floyd. I will forever have Lorenzo Carter and Leonard Floyd melded in my mind as the same person, so I apologize. If the Falcons have both of them, I will never get it straight in my head. But he's still out there. But I think Marcus Davenport, to me, is a name that would not surprise me at all. It's got to be somebody. They have got to get an edge rusher. If you roll in there with Lorenzo Carter and the young guys, Malone and Ibikiti, and say this is our pass rush again, I don't know what the fan base is supposed to do with that.
Okay. Well, we'll figure out what the fan base can do with the new tight end and whether or not he's going to eat into Kyle Pitts' shares of the offense, or more importantly, eat into Parker Hesse's playing time when we discuss Jonnu Smith, the new addition here, coming up here with Josh Kendall of The Athletic. So still plenty more to come on today's episode, getting into the other moves that the Falcons made during day one of this legal tampering period. But first, guys, I want to tell you about Built Bar. Everybody's trying to eat a little bit healthier this time of year. And if you want to eat healthy but not have to compromise on taste, you can do so with Built Bar. It's the protein bar that tastes just like a candy bar. They're all covered in 100% real chocolate. They have great macros, like only 130 calories, only 4 grams of sugar, but you're getting a whopping 17 grams of protein. And guys, you can head on over to built.com and find out their limited time flavors. They're always coming out with new ones like each and every week, but you can also head to your local Walmart or Sam's Club as well. Walk to the pharmacy section at Walmart and get yourself a 4-bar box of cookies and cream or double chocolate. And if you're at Sam's, run in and get a 13-bar box of peanut butter brownie or coconut almond. You will thank me later. So continuing today's episode, the other move that the Falcons made ahead of the official start of the legal tampering period at 12 p.m. Eastern time Monday was trading for Patriots tight end Jonnu Smith, sending the 7th round pick that they got from Buffalo for Dean Marlowe in a midseason trade. That trade will not be official until Wednesday at 4 p.m. when the league year starts. But this is a reunion between Jonnu Smith and Arthur Smith. Had obviously a lot of success in Tennessee, which netted him a big contract in New England. I know a lot of people thought at that time when he signed with the Patriots 2 years ago that a lot of people sort of circled him as a potential Falcons free agent target until we learned that the Falcons had no money to spend that type of money. But do you expect Jonnu Smith to look more like the player he was in Tennessee, or maybe potentially the player in the last couple of years in New England that I think pretty much everybody who covers the Patriots would probably label as a major free agent bust?
I would expect somewhere in the middle. I mean, if my memory is right, going back a year, you were one of the first people I saw mention the Michael Pruitt. Watch Arthur Smith go out and get Michael Pruitt, another tight end he's got some familiarity with. Jonnu Smith to me feels like Michael Pruitt plus. He's sort of a one step ahead in the Michael Pruitt evaluation, whatever, the next step up in that progress. He fits in nicely with Kyle Smith. I don't think this precludes them bringing Michael Pruitt back as well, but he's a guy that they can use as the big-bodied inline tight end you pointed out today. He's been kind of a favorite on that leak tight end screen for Arthur Smith. Everything has got to be viewed, I think, in terms of how it affects Kyle Pitts and Drake London. That's what, and that's where this offense is this passing game is going to be buttered. So Jonnu Smith to me becomes, your number 3 target. I don't expect them to go high on wide receiver in the draft. So I think Jonnu Smith, supplants Olamide Zaccheaus as your third pass catcher in this offense. What that total is, that's yet to be seen.
Yeah, I'm a big fan of Jonnu Smith. Obviously, Arthur Smith had a lot of success with him in Tennessee, so I'm looking forward to seeing him kind of bouncing back after a couple of rough seasons in New England, where he was just kind of a non-factor in their offense. But part of me does kind of wonder a little bit, because I kind of had similar expectations with Anthony Firkser sort of being a major contributor to the offense last year, and we didn't really quite see that. And so it does give me a little bit of pause of just automatically assuming a little bit that, oh, well, Arthur Smith knows him and he'll, be good here. But I do think the thing that Jonnu Smith has in his favor versus Firkser is that he can be that sort of inline player. And I think that's part of the reason why Firkser kind of didn't really do much, because the Falcons realized pretty quickly in the season that they're going to run their offense through, running the football and having that tight end that could be an impact blocker. And I think Jonnu Smith is more that guy. So he should mesh a little bit better in the offense than Firkser did last year.
And they clearly, the numbers I've seen is he's going to be a $10 million hit on the salary cap in 2023. You've got some flexibility in 2024 if it doesn't work out. But to invest that much when you have so many other needs, to invest that much of your 23 salary cap in a guy, clearly they thought that was a spot they had to fill that role, whoever it was, whatever it looked like, that was something that they needed, because that, they've obviously been working on this for a little while now.
Yeah. Well, speaking of big salary cap hits, let's talk about Chris Lindstrom, right? The now highest paid guard in the NFL. What are your thoughts on that move?
I think this is Arthur Smith. I mean, for starters, Chris Lindstrom has not put a foot wrong on or off the field in 4 years in Atlanta. He's one of the, he is a delight to be around. From everything I've seen, everything that they put out about the Walter Payton Man of the Year stuff, all the stuff. I mean, that's completely genuine. He is a great guy, and Arthur Smith has been real consistent, saying we are going to reward the players who do it the right way, consistently every day, and we're not going to reward the guys who don't meet a very high bar in that area. Jake Matthews and Grady Jarrett have been the only two so far. So Chris Lindstrom now comes into that club. So this is the Falcons saying, yeah, we're going to spend a lot of money on a guard, and that's important to us because we want to run the football. We want to have a good offensive line, but just as much, we're drawing a circle around the guys that we think are Falcons. This is what we want to be done. So Chris Lindstrom now enters that circle and kind of becomes foundational, or definitely becomes foundational for this regime and what they want this team to be.
Yeah, I'm sitting here potentially looking ahead to next year, because I figured Lindstrom would get a big number. I figured it would probably come in under $20 million, but very close to it. But obviously going over $20 million with 105 over 5 years, so averaging $21 million a year. But I can't help but think, do you see a similar situation with AJ Terrell next year, who probably will be up for a sort of contract extension? And given that the Falcons made Lindstrom the highest paid guard in the NFL, there's a possibility that they could potentially make Terrell maybe the highest paid corner in the NFL? Could you see something like that happening?
I could see something like that happening. I'm not sure we're there yet with the front office and the head coach on AJ Terrell. I think obviously he's an elite defensive player, but in terms of reaching that upper echelon of what they want their guys to be, I'm not sure AJ, I mean, he's bumping his head on it, but I'm not sure he is fully there yet to be, not to say they wouldn't offer him some kind of deal, but are they going to offer him a knock your socks off, I guarantee you he's going to retire a Falcon, Arthur Blank Falcon for life deal? My gut, the vibe I get is he's not quite there yet.
Okay, well, we'll see what type of season he has, but obviously, there is a very large carrot in front of the horse. I don't know my metaphors. I'm sorry.
Like that works.
For him to sort of seek. Speaking of Lindstrom, who's going to play next to him? That's my other question for you, Josh.
I'm still Kaleb McGary circled there. We didn't see him linked to anybody on Monday. I still think it makes the most sense for Atlanta to say. So my gut feeling was it makes the most sense for Atlanta to say to Kaleb McGary, go see what's out there, because they probably don't think a ton of people are going to be beating the door down, because he fits well into kind of one type of offense, and it's Atlanta's type of offense. So they figure Kaleb McGary goes out into the open market, and 28 teams think, he's not worth a ton to us because of his inconsistencies pass blocking, and this is how we want to live. We want to live throwing the football. And so then Kaleb McGary comes back, and they can kind of meet in the middle on their contract demands. Now, we did see kind of the right tackle/tackle market get a little wacky today. Mike McGlinchey gets a big deal. So, on one hand, you're seeing some of those tackle needy teams fill their holes, which is good for the Falcons in that regard. You're seeing those guys get big deals, which McGary's camp probably likes. I still think those two sides meet somewhere in the middle is the most likely scenario.
Okay. Well, last but not least, we got to talk about Keith Smith and Bradley Pinion, and it's just another indicator that special teams matters.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, Keith Smith is, I meant to look. I've been crazy busy day. I meant to look. I think he's got to be top 3 on this team in special team snaps. He's a guy that Arthur Smith has unsolicited, talked about being a leader in the locker room, et cetera, et cetera. Bradley Pinion did everything they wanted him to do. So, you're always Keith Smith. Pinion's a little different because he's a punter, but Keith Smith is at the point in his career where you just never know. Is this his last year? Is this his last year? So that to me was not a no-brainer. I'm glad to see them get it done. Clearly, that's something that they wanted to get done. Again, my man Parker Hesse. I don't know what we're going to do with him. I don't know where he goes. We got to find some Parker Hesse snaps.
Yeah, I sit here. I know Jonnu Smith can dabble a little bit at fullback. I know Parker Hesse dabbled a little bit at fullback. I'm curious where Parker Hesse fits into this offense. He was such an integral part of their run game working. So they got to find a role for him. But I'm just kind of curious. Is it just 3 tight end sets all day long for the Falcons in 2023?
Yeah, and then if they re-sign Michael Pruitt, then your guy Felipe Franks, you still got to find snaps for him. So it's going to be fascinating.
Okay, all right. Looking for that 14 personnel. So, Josh, I really appreciate you coming on, sharing your insights into this. Hopefully, we'll have you back on at some point. I don't know when, but maybe if that Lamar Jackson news drops, maybe we'll get you back on for that.
I'll come back on for the Lamar Jackson trade. Sounds good.
All right, man. Let the people know where they can find your stuff.
At The Athletic, on Twitter, Josh The Athletic. Love to have you. Thanks.
So hopefully we are now wrapping up today's episode. Hopefully there's not a whole lot more news to break down for the Falcons. Well, I mean, I'm not going to say hopefully, but it's just, I don't want to have to constantly do all the editing. So my plan all week long is we're going to try to, record and upload an episode by 7-8 o'clock every night. But basically I cannot make any promises if any breaking news happens for the Falcons. after 6 p.m. Eastern time that will be on those episodes. But if we have to do emergency pods, all the content that you guys are craving, you will get. You just may, some of these moves we might talk about the next day as opposed to the night it happened. So I will apologize in advance if that is the case, just because this is a new experience. We haven't done this in a while where, we've had to react to the Falcons being proactive in free agency. Like, we've been active in free agency back in the days or in the early days of the podcast. But, the last couple of years now that we've been on YouTube and we try to get the episode up, the night before, we haven't had to deal with that. So it's a learning process. So we'll figure it out. But obviously there's going to be a lot more content to come, guys. But, we will leave it at that. Make sure you send in any feedback, questions, whatever you want to have, your thoughts on these moves so far by hitting me up, via email at lockedonfalcons@mail.com. You can hit me up on social media at Locked On Falcons, either on Facebook or Twitter. You can leave a comment here on Locked On Falcons YouTube channel. You can join the Discord, Locked On Falcons, a link in the description below. But guys, I want to thank you once again for making Locked On Falcons your first listen each and every day. And for your second listen, check out the Locked On NFL Draft Podcast. Damian Parson and Keith Sanchez, the hosts of, they're hosts of that podcast. They're coming from the Draft Network. They provide in-depth coverage on the top prospects, deep dives into sleepers and hidden gems that are going to help change your team's upcoming fortunes in the draft. And I know some of you guys have not been thrilled the last couple of days with the Falcons moves. Maybe you're coming back around on them after today's moves. So, things are looking up, and you can continue to look up by checking out the Locked On NFL Draft Podcast on YouTube or wherever you get your podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.